The airport was bustling with travelers, announcements echoing through the terminals, and the scent of fresh coffee wafting from nearby cafes. Lena Johnson walked confidently through the crowd, her white dress flowing elegantly as she pulled her small luggage behind her. The dress was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a custom-made gift from her husband, Marcus, designed specifically for her birthday trip. It represented her grace, confidence, and her husband's thoughtful love. As she approached the TSA security checkpoint, Lena smiled politely at the agents standing ahead. She had flown many times before and knew the routine well. The line moved slowly, passengers quietly shuffling forward, but Lena didn't mind. She adjusted her purse on her shoulder and glanced at her watch. She had plenty of time before her flight, and she was looking forward to relaxing in the lounge. At the checkpoint, several TSA agents stood ready, their blue uniforms neatly pressed. Among them was Dirk Shaw, a tall man with a commanding presence and a sharp gaze. Shaw was known for being overly strict, sometimes going beyond what the job required. Today, his eyes landed on Lena as she stepped forward. Lena placed her belongings in the plastic bins, removing her shoes and carefully laying her purse and jacket on the conveyor belt. She walked calmly through the body scanner, expecting the usual wave-through. But as she stepped out, Shaw raised his hand. "Ma'am, step aside for additional screening," he said, his tone brisk. Lena blinked, a little surprised, but complied without argument. "Of course," she said politely, stepping to the side. Shaw's gaze lingered on her dress, and a faint smirk appeared on his face. "That's a fancy dress," he remarked, loud enough for others nearby to hear. A few passengers glanced over, sensing something unusual. "Thank you," Lena replied, keeping her tone neutral. She wasn't interested in small talk. She just wanted to finish the screening and move on. But Shaw seemed to have other plans. He called over another agent, whispering something to him while pointing at Lena's dress. The other agent looked hesitant but nodded, stepping back as Shaw approached Lena. "Your dress looks unusual," Shaw said, pretending to inspect it. "We'll need to check it thoroughly." Lena frowned slightly. "Is there something wrong?" she asked, her voice steady but questioning. "It's just protocol," Shaw replied, though his tone carried a hint of amusement. He reached out and lightly tugged at the hem of her dress, claiming he needed to check its fabric. Lena stiffened, uncomfortable with the unnecessary scrutiny. "Please be careful," she said firmly. "This dress is delicate." But Shaw didn't stop. With one careless pull, the fragile fabric tore slightly, leaving a noticeable rip. Gasps came from the nearby line of passengers, and Lena's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," Shaw said, though his smirk suggested otherwise. "It must have been weaker than it looked." Lena took a deep breath, calming herself before speaking. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor," she said, her tone clear and unwavering. Shaw shrugged. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job," he said dismissively. "If you have a problem, feel free to file a complaint." The incident drew murmurs from the crowd, and a few passengers even pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Lena stood tall, refusing to let the moment break her composure. Inside, she felt a simmering anger, not just for the disrespect she had faced, but for the casual way Shaw had dismissed her concerns. As she gathered her belongings and walked away, she quietly reached into her purse and took out her phone. She needed to make a call, one that would change everything. She dialed her husband, Marcus, the man who not only loved her but owned the very airport they stood in. Lena walked briskly through the airport, clutching her torn dress as if it would somehow hide the damage done to her dignity. Her polished calm was intact, but her mind raced. The audacity of that TSA agent, Dirk Shaw, replayed in her head, each smirk and dismissive comment fueling her resolve. Finding a quiet corner near a row of shops, Lena took out her phone. She knew exactly who to call. Marcus Johnson wasn't just her husband. He was a man who valued fairness and respect above all else. And most importantly, he wasn't just any businessman. He was the owner of this airport. She dialed his number, and Marcus answered almost immediately. "Lena, how's everything going?" he asked, his voice warm. "Not great," she said, her voice calm but edged with frustration. "Something happened at the TSA checkpoint." Marcus's tone shifted instantly, becoming serious. "What happened? Are you okay?" Lena took a steadying breath and explained everything. The unnecessary scrutiny, the unwarranted remarks, and the careless tearing of her custom dress. Marcus listened in silence, but Lena could feel his anger building on the other end of the line. "That's unacceptable," Marcus said firmly when she finished. "Where are you now?" "I'm near the shops, just past security," she replied. "I didn't want to cause a scene, but Marcus, this isn't just about me." It felt personal. Marcus was quiet for a moment before responding. "I'm at my office in the administrative wing. Stay where you are. I'll handle this." Lena waited, her composure steady but her heart pounding. Within minutes, Marcus arrived, dressed in a tailored suit that gave him an air of quiet authority. His presence always reassured her, and today was no different. "Lena," he said, his eyes softening as he took in the sight of her torn dress. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, managing a small smile. "But I'm not letting this slide." "Neither am I," Marcus said, his tone firm. "Let's get to the bottom of this." Marcus led Lena to a private conference room in the administrative wing. He quickly assembled a team, including the airport's head of security, Mr. Collins, and the operations manager, Ms. Rivera. Both arrived promptly, their expressions serious as Marcus briefed them on the incident. "We need to review the surveillance footage from the TSA checkpoint," Marcus said. "I want to see exactly what happened." Collins nodded. "I'll pull up the footage immediately." As they waited, Marcus turned to Lena. "Did anyone else see what happened?" "A few passengers," Lena said. "And there was a younger TSA agent. She seemed uncomfortable with what Shaw was doing, but she didn't speak up." "Noted," Marcus said. "We'll find her too." The surveillance footage confirmed Lena's account. The video showed Direct Shaw's actions clearly, his smirks, the unnecessary tugging at her dress, and the way he dismissed her protests. Marcus's jaw tightened as he watched, but he kept his composure. "This is unacceptable," Ms. Rivera said, shaking her head. "He's overstepped his authority." "It's more than that," Marcus replied. "This isn't just poor judgment, it's a lack of basic respect." Collins agreed. "We'll pull Shaw in for questioning immediately." Meanwhile, Marcus made another call, this time to his legal team. He wanted to ensure that whatever action they took was both swift and thorough. "This isn't just about my wife," Marcus said to his lawyer. "It's about ensuring no one else has to go through something like this." Lena watched him, her heart swelling with pride. Marcus wasn't just reacting out of anger. He was focused on justice, not just for her but for everyone who had been mistreated by someone like Shaw. As the team dispersed to take action, Marcus turned back to Lena. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again." Lena nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "Thank you, Marcus. You deserve respect." "Lena," Marcus said softly, "and so does everyone else who walks through this airport." Together, they prepared for the next steps, determined to turn an ugly incident into an opportunity for change. As the airport operations team moved swiftly to investigate the incident, Direct Shaw, the TSA agent in question, was oblivious to the growing storm. Confident and unbothered, he carried on with his day at the security checkpoint, unaware that his actions had set wheels in motion he couldn't stop. In the administrative wing, Marcus Johnson and his team were piecing together everything they needed to address the issue. Lena sat beside Marcus, quietly observing as Mr. Collins, the head of security, returned with updates. "We've located the TSA agent who seemed uncomfortable during the incident," Collins began. "Her name is Karen Morales. She's a junior officer and has agreed to provide her account." "Good," Marcus said. "Bring her in." Karen Morels walked into the conference room nervously, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked young, perhaps in her mid-20s, and her expression was a mix of apprehension and relief. "Ms. Morels," Marcus said, his tone calm but firm, "thank you for coming. I understand you were present during the incident with my wife." Karen nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I didn't know what to do. I could tell it wasn't right, but I didn't have the authority to stop it." Marcus gestured for her to sit. "We're not here to place blame on you. We just need the truth." Karen hesitated, then began to recount the events. "Agent Shaw has a reputation," she said carefully. "He's strict, but sometimes he takes it too far. When Mrs. Johnson came through, I could see he was targeting her. He didn't need to inspect her dress. It was unnecessary. And when he pulled it and it tore, I knew it wasn't an accident." Karen's voice grew steadier as she continued. "I wanted to speak up, but I was afraid of losing my job. I'm sorry." Lena, sitting quietly, gave Karen a reassuring smile. "Thank you for being honest," she said softly. "It's not easy to stand up in situations like that." With Karen's testimony and the surveillance footage, the evidence against Shaw was undeniable. Marcus turned to Mr. Collins. "Have Shaw brought in. It's time for him to answer for his actions." Collins nodded and left the room, returning shortly with Derek Shaw. Shaw walked in with an air of confidence, but it faltered slightly when he saw Marcus and Lena sitting across the table. "Have a seat, Mr. Shaw," Marcus said, his tone firm but professional. Shaw sat down, his expression guarded. "What's this about?" "We've reviewed the footage and heard accounts of what happened at the checkpoint," Marcus began. "Your actions toward my wife were unprofessional and unacceptable." Shaw straightened in his seat. "I was just doing my job. Security screenings can't always be comfortable. Your job doesn't include humiliating passengers or damaging their belongings," Marcus replied sharply. "You singled out my wife for no legitimate reason and caused unnecessary harm." Shaw's face turned defensive. "Look, if her dress tore, that wasn't my fault. It must have been fragile." Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. "We've seen the footage, Mr. Shaw. We know what happened." Shaw opened his mouth to argue but stopped when Mr. Collins placed a folder on the table. Inside were reports from previous passengers and staff, highlighting a pattern of similar behavior. Shaw's confidence crumbled as he realized the depth of the investigation. "This isn't just about my wife," Marcus said. "Your actions have impacted others as well. This stops now." Shaw sat silently, his earlier arrogance replaced with unease. After Shaw was escorted out of the room, Marcus turned to Collins. "Suspend him immediately and begin the formal disciplinary process. We can't allow behavior like this to continue." "Yes, sir," Collins replied. Marcus turned to Lena, his expression softening. "We're getting closer to justice." Lena nodded, her faith in Marcus and his leadership reaffirmed. The fight wasn't over, but they were making progress. The room was quiet after Derek Shaw had been escorted out, but the energy was tense. Lena sat beside Marcus, watching him carefully as he reviewed the growing pile of evidence. Each document and recording pointed to something larger than just her incident. This was a pattern, and Marcus wasn't going to let it go unnoticed. Mr. Collins, the head of security, returned to the conference room with a determined expression. "Sir, I've spoken to a few staff members who've worked with Shaw," he began. "Their accounts align with what Ms. Morales said. It seems Shaw has a history of overstepping his authority, especially when dealing with passengers he perceives as vulnerable." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled thoughtfully. "Has anyone ever filed formal complaints against him?" Collins nodded. "Yes, but none of them went far. The reports were either dismissed due to lack of evidence or brushed aside as misunderstandings." "Convenient," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. He turned to Lena. "This isn't just about what happened to you. Shaw's behavior has clearly been a problem for a long time." Lena nodded, her voice steady. "If we don't address this, it will keep happening. Not just to me, but to others." Meanwhile, Ms. Rivera, the operations manager, entered the room carrying a stack of printed emails. I pulled some internal communications regarding previous complaints, she said, placing the papers on the table. You're not going to like what you see. Marcus picked up one of the pages and began reading. The emails revealed a disturbing pattern. Every time someone raised concerns about Shaw's behavior, the responses were vague and dismissive. Supervisors had repeatedly failed to take meaningful action. This shows negligence, Marcus said, his tone sharp. People trusted the system to protect them, and it let them down. Rivera nodded. It's clear that the leadership in Shaw's department didn't take these complaints seriously. They allowed his behavior to continue unchecked. As the team reviewed the evidence, Karen Morales, the junior TSA agent, re-entered the room. She looked nervous but determined. I thought of something else, she said. A lot of us have seen Shaw target specific passengers. People he thinks won't fight back. It's like he enjoys making them feel small. Lena's heart sank at Karen's words. She had felt the humiliation firsthand, and it angered her to think of others experiencing the same. Thank you for coming forward, Marcus said, his tone reassuring. Your honesty will help us make real changes. Karen nodded, a faint smile on her face. I just want to do the right thing. With the pieces coming together, Marcus decided it was time to escalate the issue. He called for an emergency meeting with the airport's board of directors. As the owner, he had the authority to demand accountability, and he wasn't going to let this opportunity pass. Lena, Marcus said, turning to his wife, I want you to join the meeting. Your voice matters here. Lena hesitated for a moment but then nodded. If it helps others, I'll do it. The board meeting was set for the following morning. Marcus spent the rest of the evening preparing, reviewing every detail to ensure nothing was overlooked. Lena watched him work, admiring his determination and focus. She knew he wasn't just fighting for her. He was fighting for everyone who had been mistreated. Thank you for taking this so seriously, Lena said softly as they sat together later that night. Marcus reached for her hand, his expression gentle. You deserve respect, Lena. Everyone does, and I won't stop until we make this right. The next day, as they prepared for the meeting, Marcus and Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. The truth was out in the open, and the time for action had come. The fight for justice wasn't over, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The boardroom was filled with tension as Marcus and Lena stepped in. The long table was surrounded by members of the airport's board of directors, all looking serious and expectant. The large glass windows overlooked the busy runway outside, but the room's focus was entirely on the meeting ahead. Lena, dressed in a sleek yet modest outfit, sat beside Marcus. She looked calm and composed, but inside, her heart raced. This wasn't just about her. It was about exposing the system that had failed and ensuring it didn't happen again. Marcus stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding the room. As the airport owner, his voice carried weight, but he knew he needed to present the evidence clearly and convincingly. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Marcus began, his voice steady but firm. We have a serious issue to address, one that reflects on the integrity and reputation of this airport. The board members exchanged glances, but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Marcus motioned to the head of security, Mr. Collins, who stepped forward with a stack of documents. Yesterday, my wife, Lena Johnson, was subjected to unprofessional and unacceptable behavior at the TSA checkpoint. Agent Derek Shaw targeted her unnecessarily, damaged her belongings, and dismissed her concerns. One of the board members, a woman named Ms. Carter, leaned forward. Are you saying this was a case of misconduct? It was more than that, Marcus replied. This was part of a larger pattern of behavior. Derek Shaw has a history of targeting passengers, especially those he perceives as vulnerable. We've gathered surveillance footage, staff testimonies, and internal communications that reveal a troubling lack of accountability. Collins distributed copies of the evidence to the board members. The room grew quiet as they read through the documents, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. "This is unacceptable," said Mr. Patel, another board member. "If this behavior has been ongoing, why wasn't it addressed sooner?" Marcus gestured to Ms. Rivera, the operations manager, who spoke next. "The issue lies with the lack of follow-through on complaints. While some reports were filed, they were dismissed or ignored by Shaw's supervisors. This allowed the behavior to continue unchecked." Lena spoke up for the first time, her voice steady and clear. "I understand that security is a critical part of this airport, and I respect the hard work of those who protect us. But no one should have to endure the kind of treatment I experienced. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was humiliating." Her words hung in the air, resonating with the weight of truth. The board members nodded, clearly moved by her calm yet powerful statement. The discussion shifted to accountability. Marcus didn't mince words. Direct Shaw's actions are his own, but the lack of oversight enabled him. "We need to hold individuals accountable, but we also need to fix the system that allowed this to happen." "What do you propose?" asked Ms. Carter. "First," Marcus said, "Shaw should be terminated immediately. Second, we need to implement new policies to ensure every complaint is properly investigated. This includes better training for all security staff and regular evaluations of their behavior." The board members murmured their agreement. "This will require resources and time," Mr. Pidal said, "but it's necessary." As the meeting continued, Lena watched Marcus with admiration. His leadership was firm but fair, focused on creating lasting change. She could see the respect in the board members' eyes as they listened to him. By the end of the meeting, the board had unanimously agreed to Marcus's proposals. Shaw would be terminated, and a formal apology would be issued to Lena. More importantly, a task force would be created to oversee the implementation of the new policies. As the meeting concluded, Marcus turned to Lena, his expression softening. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We're going to make sure this place becomes a model of respect and accountability." Lena smiled, feeling a sense of relief and pride. "Thank you for standing up for me, and for everyone else who's been through something like this." As they left the boardroom, Lena felt lighter, knowing that real change was on the horizon. Marcus had not only fought for her dignity, but had set in motion a transformation that would benefit countless others. Together, they had turned a painful experience into a catalyst for something better. The aftermath of the board meeting brought a sense of both relief and determination for Lena and Marcus. Lena felt lighter, knowing that the truth about Direct Shaw's behavior had been exposed. But she also knew that this wasn't just about justice for her. It was about making sure no one else faced the same kind of treatment. That evening, Marcus sat in his office, surrounded by files, emails, and plans. Lena walked in, holding 2 cups of tea, and placed one on his desk. She sat across from him, her expression thoughtful. "You've been at this all day," Lena said softly. "You should take a break." Marcus leaned back in his chair, taking the sip of tea. "I can't stop now, Lena. This is more than just firing one person. We need to fix the entire system." Lena smiled gently. "I know. That's what I admire about you. You always think big." The next day, the airport's internal task force was officially formed. Marcus and Ms. Rivera took charge of leading it, with Mr. Collins ensuring security staff were involved in the process. Lena joined as an advisor, offering her unique perspective as someone who had experienced the problem firsthand. The team's first step was to review all past complaints against TSA staff. Dozens of reports surfaced, revealing that Shaw wasn't the only one who had abused his authority. While his actions were the most severe, there were other instances of unnecessary scrutiny, rude behavior, and dismissive attitudes toward passengers. "This is worse than I thought," Marcus said during one of the task force meetings. "We've got a culture problem here. It's not just about a few bad apples. It's about the environment that allowed them to thrive." The team agreed, and together they began drafting new policies. These included mandatory training on respect and professionalism, a clear process for passengers to file complaints, and an independent committee to review those complaints. Meanwhile, Lena found herself speaking with more passengers and staff. Many approached her to share their stories, inspired by her courage to stand up against Shaw. Some were passengers who had been mistreated, while others were staff members like Karen Morales, who felt powerless to speak out in the past. One woman, a frequent traveler named Diana, told Lena about an experience where she was humiliated in front of her children during a screening. "I didn't think anyone would care," Diana said, "but seeing you fight back, it gives me hope." Lena listened intently, her heart heavy yet encouraged. She realized her story was becoming a symbol for change, and she wanted to use that to help others. As the days went by, the airport began implementing changes. New posters were put up throughout the terminals, encouraging passengers to report any mistreatment and assuring them their concerns would be taken seriously. Security staff attended workshops on how to handle passengers with respect and professionalism. Karen Morales became a key part of these workshops, sharing her experiences and emphasizing the importance of speaking up when something felt wrong. Her confidence grew as she realized she could make a difference. Marcus also worked with the airport's PR team to issue a public statement. The statement acknowledged the incident, apologized to Lena and others affected, and outlined the steps being taken to improve the airport's operations. One evening, as Marcus and Lena walked through the airport together, they noticed something different. The atmosphere felt lighter, the staff more approachable. Passengers smiled at Lena, recognizing her from the news, and thanking her for speaking out. "This feels good," Lena said, looking around. "It's not perfect yet, but it's a start." Marcus nodded. "Change takes time, but we're on the right path." As they reached the main terminal, Lena spotted Karen Morales talking to a group of new TSA recruits. Karen's voice was confident, her gestures animated as she explained the importance of respect and fairness. "She's really come into her own," Lena said with a smile. "She's part of the change," Marcus replied. "Just like you." That night, as they sat together at home, Lena reflected on everything that had happened. What started as a painful, humiliating experience had become the spark for something greater. It wasn't easy, but with Marcus by her side, she had turned her pain into progress. "We're not done yet," Lena said, her tone firm but hopeful. "No," Marcus agreed, holding her hand. "But we're just getting started." The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Lena felt truly free and ready to keep fighting for what was right. Weeks had passed since the incident at the TSA checkpoint, and the changes Marcus, Lena, and their team implemented were beginning to show results. The airport, once a place where passengers occasionally felt dismissed or mistreated, was evolving into a space where respect and accountability were prioritized. Lena had stayed actively involved in the process, attending meetings, giving feedback on new policies, and continuing to listen to the stories of passengers and staff. Her voice had become a symbol of change, and people were taking notice. One morning, Marcus called Lena to his office. When she arrived, he gestured for her to sit and handed her a folder. "What's this?" Lena asked, curious. "It's a report from the task force," Marcus explained. "It shows the progress we've made." Lena opened the folder and began reading. The data was promising. Complaints about mistreatment had dropped significantly, and passenger satisfaction surveys were showing noticeable improvement. The new training programs for TSA staff had received positive feedback, with many staff members expressing that they felt more confident and supported in their roles. "This is amazing," Lena said, smiling. "It feels good to see all this hard work paying off." Marcus nodded. "It's a step in the right direction, but there's still more to do." The airport had also introduced a new feedback system, allowing passengers to rate their experiences and leave comments directly through a mobile app. Lena reviewed some of the comments with Marcus, feeling encouraged by the positive responses. One passenger wrote, This airport used to feel intimidating, but now it feels welcoming. The staff actually seem like they care. Thank you for making these changes. Another commented, I've noticed a real difference in how TSA agents treat people. It's refreshing to see respect becoming a priority. Lena's heart swelled with pride. She had once felt small and powerless in the face of disrespect, but now she knew her efforts were making a tangible difference. As part of the ongoing changes, the airport held a public event to showcase its commitment to improvement. The event featured speeches from Marcus, Ms. Rivera, and even Karen Morales, who had become a vocal advocate for fairness and professionalism in her role as a TSA agent. Karen's speech was particularly moving. I used to feel like my voice didn't matter, she said, but seeing how this incident sparked change has taught me that standing up for what's right is always worth it. We all have a role to play in creating a better environment for passengers and staff alike. The audience applauded, and Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in Karen's growth. She had gone from a hesitant observer to a confident leader. At the end of the event, Marcus invited Lena to speak. She hesitated for a moment, but then stepped forward, her calm, poised demeanor commanding attention. This journey started with a moment of pain, Lena began, but it has turned into something so much greater. This isn't just about me. It's about creating a space where everyone feels respected and valued. Change takes time, but when we work together, it's possible. Her words resonated with the crowd, and as she stepped back, the applause was deafening. Marcus stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a proud smile on his face. Later that evening, Lena and Marcus walked through the airport together, reflecting on everything they had accomplished. The once tense atmosphere felt lighter, and the staff greeted them warmly as they passed. You've changed this place, Marcus said, glancing at Lena. We've changed it, Lena corrected, smiling. This wouldn't have been possible without your support. Marcus nodded, his expression serious, but it was your courage that started it all. As they stood near the large windows overlooking the runway, Lena felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had turned a painful experience into an opportunity for growth and progress, not just for herself, but for countless others. This isn't the end, she said, her voice filled with determination. There's always more work to do. Marcus smiled, and we'll do it together. As the planes took off into the night sky, Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had found her voice, and she wasn't afraid to use it. Together, she and Marcus had set a new standard, one that would continue to inspire change for years to come.